the spiritual activist. I could not be thrilled. We are starting on time today. We've got an extraordinary panel for you. I'm just beside myself with the level of energy and passion and love that we have in the room today. First of all, I'd like to welcome Andrea DiLorenzo, Global Activator of Love from AndreaDiLorenzo.com. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again. So happy to be here.
I can't get rid of a co-host. Rahul Bhambhani from the Invincible Man. Welcome, Rahul.
Hello.
That's all I get. Okay, hello.
That's all you get. Get this.
We've got David Pagan and myself from Kick-Ass Dad. Welcome, David.
Hello, all.
Great to have you. Kelly Marceau, author of What Sexy Consciously Awake Women Want Sexually from Men. Welcome, Kelly.
Hello.
And our featured guest today, Chris Assaad. He's a writer, musician, just an incredibly creative dude, really focused on that passion, bringing the love, really creating peaceful environments, and starting, I would like to say, a movement of conscious awareness in his community and around the world. Welcome, Chris. How are you today?
I'm amazing. Thank you. Thank you for that introduction.
You are amazing. And so I kind of wanted to find out a little bit about you. What brought you on this journey? You're a musician. Did you always start, or were you always on this path of kind of spirituality, or was this something that evolved over time? Kind of walk us through your journey.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's always exciting to go back to the moment where I feel like my life really took a major turn, and a lot of things just converged and aligned and gave me a big wake up. So no, I wasn't always on the spiritual path. I wasn't always on the creative path. I grew up in a very religious home, so there was that, you know, that sort of influence. And I also grew up in a home of all professionals. My parents are, my dad's a dentist, my mom's a doctor, and sort of my menu of options in terms of career were, you know, doctor, lawyer, dentist.
So you're a huge disappointment to them then.
Well, I'm sort of like the black sheep of the family, but in the best way possible. They've embraced my rebellious ways. So definitely took some going against the grain.
What was your turning point?
So my turning point was I was in third year university. I started getting into live music and wanting to just pick up the guitar just for fun, to jam, you know, around the campfire with some friends. And I had a pretty dramatic experience in that I realized fairly quickly that I wasn't picking up the musical flow wasn't happening for me the way it was for everybody else, which was the first time in my life I was really lagging significantly. And then I discovered that the reason was that I was being challenged by a hearing loss due to a hereditary condition, and it started happening very, very quickly. I was losing my hearing in third year university, and I went to see a couple specialists, and the first doctor told me that I had you know, two options, and one was to do this surgery, but that if the surgery was unsuccessful, I could potentially hearing completely in that year. So he recommended I just, like, you know, cope and wear a hearing aid, which I tried and was not just, I didn't want to accept it. It was very challenging for me to just accept that, I guess you could say socially, and also just, you know, experientially. Like, I have a great amount of compassion for anyone that has to use those aids, because it creates, well, at least back then, the experience of what you're hearing is very artificial, and you hear a lot of things you don't want to hear. And I won't get too much into detail about that, but I'll fast forward to the appearance of who I call Dr. Miracle Maker. So I went to see this doctor, and he was like the guy to do these surgeries, and he was very confident. He like drew my ear for me upside down, and just I felt totally at peace in his presence. And he was like, I think you should do the surgery. Like, I do these all the time, and like it's legit. It'll you'll get your hearing back. And so I had both ears operated on 6 months apart, and about a year, maybe a year and a little bit after this original diagnosis, I was granted the gift of my hearing back. And I remember, and I'll tell this, you know, if people have seen me speak on interviews before, I won't shortchange, you know, your audience of me sharing this moment, which was really one I'll never forget. It was, I got back into my car after leaving the post-op, and it's like, you know, it's like I related to like the removal of bandages. Like if you had like a nose job and you don't like know what you got, and you get, you know, you could leave the doctor's office and it's like you remove the bandages and it's that first look in the mirror. I got into my car and I turned the stereo on. I think I was listening to Dr. Dre, and which is funny considering like the music I make now is like so far from that. But there was definitely just that like that deep rhythm and bass happening, and I felt it. Like I felt it all the way to my core in a way that I hadn't for, you know, for a year and a half, and I had tears streaming down my cheeks, and I just looked up to the sky and I just thanked God for the gift of that second chance. And from that moment on, I was on fire for music. I was, at the same time in my life, I was introduced to the music of one of my greatest influences, Ben Harper, and his music completely cracked my heart open, and just really gave me a visceral experience of the impact. And I'm just going to close that door so we don't hear that. Yeah, so I basically started spending countless hours just learning Ben Harper songs note for note. Awakening, my heart opening, and my really finding my path. And then just to complete the circle of what your question was, at the very same time in my life, I met my first spiritual teacher. So I went to see this osteopath because I was having some, introduced me to the idea that I was not my thoughts. And he gave me Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now, and he taught me how to breathe. And so all of a sudden, I'm having a creative awakening. My heart is being affected by art in a way that I'd never had before. And I'm starting to, you know, connect with the witness, the place in myself where I'm connecting with this, you know, this being behind the personality, the identity, the, you know, the person that I knew myself to be up until that point. And so, yeah, life has never been the same since then.
That's beautiful, and that's interesting that you say that, and I could go into so many points, but I want to share the floor with some other folks. But one of the things that you said that I really love and resonate with is that you are not your thoughts. So oftentimes we grow up with these belief systems and structures and ideas about who we are and what we're supposed to be, and we talk down to ourselves and we limit ourselves based on other people's ideas of who we are, and so our identity gets masked behind this ideal of what we are based on somebody else's thoughts. And so I love that idea of really cracking open not only your heart, but opening your mind to the idea that you can literally create yourself as anything you choose to be.
Well, yeah, and I'll just say one more thing about that. I think for me, the revelation there was that, especially given my upbringing, my intellect, my analytical mind was always my greatest strength. So I had such a strong identification with that as who I am. I am what I think. I am my analytical mind. I am, you know, that's like my greatest strength. And so the first level of dissociation was just realizing that even that thing which I was so strongly identified would serve me in so many ways was actually not the totality of my being. There's a level beyond that where I could observe those thoughts and choose to identify with them or not.
That's a great point. One of the things that I actually woke up kind of on fire today just because we were having this kind of conversation about what it is that, you know, a spiritual activist is, and I'm going to turn it over to Rahul actually because he always asks the best question in regards to spiritual activists. But one of the things that I find to be so fascinating about this journey is that every single day is like, it's like you peel a layer and you peel a layer and you peel a layer, and you know, for me, you know, I'm literally peeling layers off every single day, and I just feel this activation of this energy being so much more powerful every time you peel another layer off. So I totally get where you're coming from. So Rahul, I know you've got a question there, so I'm going to let you ask it.
So this is a question I'll have. I mean, I want to ask Chris, and then I want to ask all of you as well, because I think that it's something we don't think about that often, perhaps, or at least I haven't thought of it that often, but I know it's a part of my life. So I remember the first time I met Chris, or like one of the first times, like the second or third time I heard him sing, and his music touched me because the guy's so real, right? Like you can just feel the sincerity of his heart even on this video. I'm sure all of you can feel it. So, when I heard his music, it touched me, and I was like, man, that's amazing. And so, Chris, my question for you is, what role do you feel music plays in the idea of spiritual activism, and how has it impacted your life, which I think you touched on with Ben Harper? And then I would ask all of you guys the same question, like how has it impacted your spiritual path and being able to live in alignment with who you really are? And I know, Andrea, you're going to have a good one for this too. Yeah.
I think everyone, yeah, this is huge.
So, Chris.
Man, I love this question, and I don't wanna overinflate Ben Harper's ego, but I did just see him in concert on Saturday, and I was with a friend of mine who had never seen him and who hasn't seen a ton of live music, and I watched her have the very same experience that I had the first time that I went to see, him in particular because of just the heart-opening nature of his music, but I just saw how this music just basically, when someone is creating and when someone is expressing their gift from that pure place, it touches, it like lights the pilot light in all of the people that are present to that. It's like when you're in the presence of somebody that's very present, it melts away whatever, it has the power to melt away whatever is keeping you from, connecting with that part of yourself. And music, is often referred to as the language of the soul, and there's a lot of different, little catchphrases about what music is. I just believe that music hits us on so many levels viscerally. It has the melodic component, the rhythmic component, the lyrical component, and then it literally is being offered by a human being. The human voice is such a powerful healing instrument that all of those elements combined just are capable of penetrating our consciousness and awakening us and opening our hearts, especially when that's the intention, in a way that nothing else that I've ever experienced in this lifetime has done for me personally. And so when I saw Ben Harper play for the first time, I felt something, and I also at the same time as being the experiencer had the knowingness, I want to make people feel that way. I'm capable of making people feel that way. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that has kept me committed to this creative and spiritual path, and that continues to be reaffirmed every time I have an experience of sharing my music with somebody who reflects back the experience that you just did, and whenever I get to experience that for myself and be reminded of why it's music for me. And I mean, it could be other things for other people too. It's not to say like music is the only, but music is magic. It's magical.
Wow, well said. Andrea.
Yeah, I'm just feeling in this moment how amazing that must feel too, because I share music, I share other people's music, I share Chris's music all the time. It's one of my things. I'm always creating playlists and CDs and sending YouTube video links to friends, and I can only imagine what that feels like to be a creator of that and to express that from inside of you and to witness that activation in people around you. I can only imagine how powerful that must be. But yeah, music has played a huge role in my life, and any opportunity I get to shout out a few of these artists that have touched me deeply and actually began my path into myself, I will always take advantage of that. But I remember I had definitely hit a low point in my life, and I was always really drawn to R&B music, hip-hop, R&B, that kind of music. And somehow I got exposed into a genre that's called neo-soul music. And I came across this artist named Guapale, and she has this song called Closer, and the song is really about taking herself closer, moving through the fear and taking herself higher. And when I first heard this song, I mean, it was a spiritual experience for sure. And I had it on CD, and I listened to it in my car for I don't know how long, a year, probably over and over. And I still hear this song, and it still touches me. And it was truly like, it was almost like my own personal affirmation, you know, card, or my own affirmation audio, that I didn't realize at the time that I was truly singing and feeling and tapping into the possibility of knowing myself beyond the obstacles that I was facing and beyond the pain I was facing, and to continue moving through and moving through. So yeah, Guapole and Jill Scott and Erykah Badu, all these. David, are you talking? You're on mute. I see your lips moving.
He's talking to somebody else.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not always about you, Andrea.
You are not the first man to say that to me.
I get that every day.
I do. Oh my God.
That's cute.
So yeah, those are just some amazing and Dwele artists that, wow. Oh, Flow Assist, incredible. Actually, everyone should check her out. She's vibrating and creating music from the highest level that I have experienced on this plane. Incredible. So yeah, music has been a huge part of my evolution.
That's beautiful, Andrea. Thank you for sharing that. And I was going to go to David next, but I just feel like Kelly is like jumping out of her seat right now. So, Kelly, I've got to hear from you. I really do. I need to hear from you on this one.
I'm actually just really enjoying listening, and now I get this. You're jumping out of your seat. You're dying to talk. I'm actually just loving the listening to everybody else.
Nice.
Well, I want to know from you, Kelly. Come on.
I mean, it's really interesting when we talk about, you know, I wanted to know, Chris, like when you talk about spirituality, or you talk about what's spiritual for you with music, like what exactly does that mean to you? Like what is your connection to that?
Well, that's a concept for sure. I think the best way that I can connect the dots is at that early sort of point in my life when I met that first spiritual teacher I was sharing with you. One of the other things that he gave me was a series of audio tapes from Ram Dass called Experiments in Truth, and he was very much describing the path of the yogi and what the objective is, right? And one of the metaphors he used was like being like a candle that does not flicker. And another example, or another sort of thing that he spoke to, is just finding that thing in life that gives us that feeling, like that just brings us really into the present moment, which just like creates an opening for us to connect with that higher consciousness, whatever, you know, I call it God, some people call it something else, but you know, whatever physical human activity or thing that we can give ourselves to, whatever path is going to create that opening to that deeper, more expansive thing. And so for me, that was always, it was music. It was like when I was playing music, it just it drew me into that space. Whenever I was in the presence of music being offered, it draws me into that space. And what's interesting is, you know, Andrea's saying it must be such an amazing experience to give that to people. The other thing about music for me is that it's my greatest teacher. So it's like, you know, you always hear about people that like, you know, that experiment with drugs, and it's like the first time you do the drug, your experience is amazing, and then every time after that, you're almost like reaching for that first experience. And in some ways, I can relate to that as it pertains to my path, because there is this thing, you know, in the Zen tradition, it's called satori, which is like this initial flash of like insight, and then it's followed by the realization that we're actually so far from the embodiment of that quality or that level of enlightenment or that level of consciousness. And so music always shows me just how present I truly am, how in my heart I really am. Sometimes I'm so in my head, my monkey mind is completely distracting me. Why are those people talking? What are those people doing? Why aren't they listening to me? That kind of stuff. So music always gives me this like really honest barometer on where I'm at in my spiritual development and where I'm at in my beingness in that particular moment. And it's endless. it appeals to me so much because there's no limit to what I can experience and how much I can evolve and expand through music as a spiritual practice.
And
I'll also say, it's not the only thing that I do. It's just the activity that allows me to express my spirituality and my expression in the most fulfilling way.
The key thing that you said that I liked the most is the emphasis on visceral, almost like embodiment, like that feeling of actually being so present in your own body that you're able to expand outward or connect with something that reflects you or mirrors you or whatever it is that that connects you to your soul. And I think that that's true for most people when it comes to music. That feeling of you can be so checked out, distracted, going in a million directions, and you hear that sound, and all of a sudden you're in the present moment, and nothing else matters except for that sound and the way that you feel and the way you experience yourself. And so that's just really beautiful. And I wanted to know that for you because everybody's idea of spirituality is different. And so I wanted to know, as a musician, as you connect to your music, what that meant for you. So thank you so much for sharing that with me. I really appreciate that.
That's a great question. Yeah, that's a great question, Kelly. One of the things that I find, and I want to turn it over to you, David, after this, because I know you've got a strong connection with music as well. But I'm sorry, I had to. When I think of music and when I think of the way, and to your point, Kelly, about that visceral experience, it cuts the bullshit like a butter knife. And when I could go to a Dave Matthews concert or Ben Harper, or you think of people like Nina Simone or Lauryn Hill with Zion. You think of these people who say, this is the inspiration. We are made of music. We are vibration. The source of all creation is vibration. And so that music is that expression of self, and we are physical, formed manifestations of that vibration. And we're sitting here, going through our day-to-day routine bullshit, and then you get hit with this energy, and it's like when you sit down for a meditation or when you sit down for some sort of daily practice that aligns you with that source. It just makes you, it's that idea of peeling away the layers, and it's. I like your point though, Chris, about the first time you take a drug or the first time you hear that music, how it's like this flash in your mind, and it's very. The idea of getting it all at once is not very yogic, because the idea is creating the daily practice of getting there, whereas the idea of blasting the doors down doesn't necessarily work. In the short term, it can help, and I think that's really the beauty of music, because at least it identifies that to people who have fallen off the path or forgotten who they are.
Mm-hmm.
Real quick, David, I know you are always the guy that's been invited to the party as the dancer. What does that mean to you?
Ow!
I don't know. I had a real strong connection with music from the time I was a child. My father was a DJ when I was growing up, so I was exposed to a lot of different types of music, and he played in a Latin band, and he used to sing in a cappella groups and stuff like that. So music was always around me. And I don't remember what age I was, but it was, what song was it? Goodness. I want to say it was a Bette Midler song. It's not my most masculine moment, but I was a child in my defense. But there was a song that was played, and it brought me to tears, and it was because I missed my grandmother, who was in New York at the time. And don't awe me, Kelly.
And don't awe me, Kelly. Don't awe me, Kelly.
Yeah. But I'm standing here naked before you guys right now. Awe is not what I want to hear.
What about you? Should we be like
Awesome. Yeah.
Masculine, David.
That's normally what I get. No, but it. So I had just a real connection with it, and I didn't understand why I was crying. My mother was asking me, what's wrong, and I couldn't describe it to her, but there was an image in my mind that was painted when I heard not just the words or the melody, but everything about it, the arrangement, and it painted a picture for me. And I think that was also the beginning of my connection with words and lyrics and my ability to do that as well. That's kind of where it started, where I got very good with imagery with either the words that I write or the words that I speak with. And Rahul and I and Michael and I have had some fantastic conversations about that, and it just kind of, it comes to me. Musical notes and stuff like that don't come to me, but lyrics do, and they come to me like in the instance, and I really I need to walk around with a recorder because I can rarely ever duplicate that again when it happens, and so. But I never shared it with anybody. Never shared my writing with anybody. And when I did, I shared it with my mother when I was a teenager, I think, or I was in college, something like that. And I shared it with her, and she immediately asked me where I copied it from. So needless to say, I shut down, and I didn't share my writing with anyone else again because it didn't, I felt like nobody believed me. And it was my mother, for God's sakes, like if anyone was going to believe me, it was going to be her, I thought. And she thought I plagiarized the whole thing. I mean, she continued to ask me. She was like, no, I understand you wrote these, but what were you looking at when you wrote them? And I was like, a blank sheet of paper, bitch. What do you mean? That's what the fuck I was looking at, And I didn't call my mother a bitch. And I'm sorry, Mom, but it really hurt. So fast forward, I had gone through kind of a rough breakup, and I wasn't seeing anyone for a long time. A long time for me is like a year or two. So for a long time, because I'm a really social guy, and a friend of mine suggested that I go sing, or that we go to karaoke, right? And I was just going to go, just as a goof, and I went, and I said, fuck it. I decided to get on stage, and I sang a song that no one expected me to sing because I'm, Hispanic guy from New York, and I sang Stained, a Stained song, just because it spoke to me. And I closed my eyes on stage. You want to know what song, don't you, Kelly? So
I do.
Yeah. It was For You by Stained. And it had nothing to do with the breakup or anything like that, but obviously, it starts off, it says, for my mother, for my father, and I had a lot of internal turmoil, a lot of conflict as it related to my family, especially my parents, and what I wanted, the me that wanted to come out, and the me that I wanted to meet personally that I had never really connected with. So I closed my eyes and I belted that song out, and I had never sang in front of anybody before. I didn't know what I sounded like. I remember recording it afterwards. I sang the song again. I sent it to my best friend who lives out in Cali. He's visiting me now. That's who I was speaking to, Andrea. He brought me the water. Yeah, and he actually just saw Guapoli at Yoshi's in San Francisco. Yeah, he just did. We were talking about it last night.
I've seen her live a couple times, but I'd love to head up north to see her.
Yeah, he goes to Yoshi's all the time. I have to link you guys together. Yeah.
I'll be there in August, so.
Yeah, well, we'll be in San Diego in August. Maybe we'll all shoot out there. Anyway, we'll talk about that off the air. At any rate, I belted it out, and it was therapy to me, because I got to go on stage and just belt out all this emotion that was locked in me for over 30 years. And just let it all out, and nobody there, even though they were all strangers, and typically I would feel, even though I'm a really outgoing guy, I'm actually shy by nature, and I don't know how that works, but it does. And it was, I felt like I was standing there naked in front of everybody, and no one was judging me. No one knew what I was talking about exactly, or what that emotion was that I was expressing. But it moved them in a certain ways. It was just a very spiritual moment for me when I got to do that. When I got to stand there and belt out this emotion, and like I said, it felt like I was standing there naked, and I was able to come down. But it was a totally inward experience for me. It was all for me, and that might be selfish or whatever, but it was all about me at that moment, and not even about the performance. It was about me standing up there and pushing some emotion out of me that needed to get out.
Well, I think isn't that where, David? Isn't that where like most of the really moving pieces come from? I mean, it's not about placating your crowd. It's about letting go and being a part of that and completely letting that go. Is that your thought, Chris? Is that how it works for you?
Yeah, I think I want what I'm also present to, especially David talking about, his creative expression. Music does have its own special thing, and I'm so happy that we're actually acknowledging that. It's really just presenting me to what it is that I love about music so much. But at the same time, like, music is a metaphor for whatever it is that we have access to as creative beings. It's just that idea of, like, expressing our creativity, expressing that, like, intangible, bringing that which is unseen into the scene through the particularly unique vantage point that each individual has. I mean, Rahul does it with his amazing writing. Andrea does it with her amazing gifts that she shares and the way that she brings truth forward, and how she so vulnerably shares herself in a myriad of ways. I can only imagine that whatever recordings are secretly stashed on David's phone have that same essence in it. And we're all here to do that. We're all here to bring that forth, and I'll say the same for you, Kelly, and you, David. I don't know what your particular form of expression is, but we all have that, and it's not always only necessarily one thing. But, going back to what you said at the top of the call, the idea of being separated from our thoughts or from this construct of who we're supposed to be, one of the major ways that manifests in our lives is there's this idea that we have to, like, walk these certain paths and do certain things, and we have to make money, and, like, we've sort of been baptized into this way of living and this way of going about our lives, and a lot of times what gets foregone is the very thing that we're here to do, which is to bring forth the divine through our expression, through our creating, and through our being. And art is a very good place to start to look for that essence being manifest. And we all know it when we see the art of nature in a sunset, or the art of a Rumi poem, or the art of an amazing song that connects with a deeper part of ourselves that's like, oh my God, like, that's why we're here. That's what we're here to do, all of us, every single one of us. And that's why I don't separate creativity and spirituality. I think they're the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's this quote I heard once. It was, "The world doesn't need another book. The world needs the joy that goes in the process of writing that book," right? It's like, and then today while I was in the shower, I was like, yeah, the result is the journey. So it's like a paradox in that sense, right? But that creative expression is what brings life to our world. And I think I was telling you yesterday, right, when we talked, Chris, like the expression ole, ole means I've witnessed God. Right, or like 2 days ago, but regardless, yeah, like that was profound when I first heard that, because I was like, it's just like you have nothing but to just witness it and just be like, oh my God, and in seeing that, it reminds you of something within that exists in everybody, right? Like that's what I strive for with my writing. I mean, that was what I worked toward the last 7 years of my life, was getting to a point where I could actually write from that space, or create from that space, which I feel what's so beautiful about this group is that everybody's in that space, right? You have your own unique expression. Like Kelly she's found her creative voice, right? So I want to kind of bring it back to that, because I know for a while you worked with people on finding their creative voice, and being in your presence elicits that even more so from me. So it's like who you are, right? It's what you do, it's what you demonstrate. And what David said about his mom looking at that and being like, you plagiarized this. I had an experience like that with my dad recently, where I showed him my book, just kind of nonchalantly, like, hey, check this out, Dad. And he like came back out of the room and was like, you wrote this shit? He's like, no. He, like, literally for hours he was stunned. That, like, even at dinner that night, he was like, I still can't believe that you wrote that. And that, I'm past it. Like, I've worked through that, like, needing approval from my father, but just thinking back to my upbringing and how that, like, it was this constant, like, battle for me and my creative voice, and my father and what he believed was what was meant for me, So I want to hear what you have to say about that.
Well, I think one of the greatest challenges in our spiritual path is that amazing gift we call family. And our parents love us, they do their best, and we're growing up, and we're expanding in a completely new time and space and generation. And one of the greatest things that we have to overcome and work through in fully claiming our birthright and our full creative expression is the inherited belief that that's not really what we're here to do. That you know, that's the stuff of hobbies and after school and pastimes, and we have to focus on whatever, you know, conventional path is going to bring us security and, you know, an assured life that looks like the one that our parents, for them, that was true, and maybe that was true. And I know that, you know, I wouldn't have the luxury of much of what I've been able to experience if it wasn't for the life that my parents provided for me and have created for me. I also know that if I lived by what they believed, I'd be a lawyer. Well, I am a lawyer. I have a law degree to prove that I went far enough on that path, and then I was like, oh, I'm not going to, this is not for me. Hell no, I got to get the hell out because my creativity is going to die inside me, and I can't let that happen. And I also think, you know, there's also a part of our parents when they see our creations, you know, it's like sometimes the light in us brings up the darkness in others, and it's like it maybe reveals to them a part of themselves that they're not prepared to fully look at, or it's just astonishing to them because it's from another world, it's from another plane, and we're an extension of them. So when they see, you know, maybe they're seeing that in you, and they're like, where did this come from? Like, how did my son create this magical thing when, you know, from their perspective, they have maybe a slightly more limited understanding of who they are and who you are.
I would love to speak to that just for a quick second, because that was exactly my experience going through college. I mean, once I was turned on to this kind of spiritual idea and this path, as a psychology minor and a psychology major and a philosophy minor, and then I just have that one philosophy teacher in college who makes you go, why the hell am I here? Like you're not doing your job for the college. You're actually here for me. Thank you for that. And that's when I quit school and went and hiked the Appalachian Trail, and you know, and then my parents were like, what the fuck is going on with this kid? And so, you know, and I'm writing all this poetry, and I'm sharing my poetry with my father, and he's like, that's great. He's like, you're a really good writer, but he's like, what are you going to do? And I was like, I'm going to be a musician. And he's like, you haven't even, you pick up the guitar like once a year. Like, how are you going to be a musician? I was like, I'm going to learn. And, you know, it's like, I was like, just, you know, so let me do that. And, you know, and then eventually, you know, you find a way to make it work. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that parents and anybody in society can do to help encourage young people be more creative is just say, go for it. You'll find a way to make it work. And that's, you know, and speaking of that, and I want to kind of tie this in here, one of our big, hairy, audacious goals, our BHAG with Kick-Ass Dad, and the reason we actually started Spiritual Activists as well, was we want to build community centers in the inner city, teach kids about art, music, dance, sustainable agriculture, give the best of society back to the youth. Our goal is to spark a renaissance. I know Rahul, his big, hairy, audacious goal is to create this consciousness movement. I can see it with Kelly. I can see it with David. I can see it with Andrea. What, Chris, is your big, hairy, audacious goal?
Good question. Very simply, I would say to elevate the level of creative expression on the planet. And, you know, I'll add to that heart-centered creative expression. Just people speaking the truth of what's in their heart through whatever form inspires them, whether it's music or surfing or, you know, maybe for somebody that is being a lawyer. I also acknowledge that, you know, as many people as there are here, there are unique paths, that there's something that each of us is here to do. We all have a, you know, specific part to play in this beautiful mosaic that we're all a part of, and so no one can tell anybody else what it is. It's just do whatever lights you up, whatever is in your heart. That's just the simplest. And so that's my big hairy audacious goal, is to just see people connecting with their hearts and expressing from that place, just like, but like courageously, like audaciously, you know, yes. Fearlessly.
Mm-hmm. I want to say something, because I think that this, I know we don't have much time left, but this is a really interesting panel of, you know, creative types. And one of the things that nobody really ever talks about is, like, how do we deal with, like, our own egos? Like, how do we deal with when we are creative and we do amazing things because they come from that place of truth? How do we deal with our egos sort of like co-opting, you know, what we do, and like what Rahul was saying earlier about, you know, it being about the journey, but also like we can't deny the fact that like there is a part in all of us that always thinks about the destination. Like when I wrote my article that went viral, I did that from a place of just like pure truth, and I had no idea that it was going to blow up. But when it did, I remember part of my process when I first sat down to write the next time was kind of like, oh my God, like now that I've done this, I feel this like pressure that I have to like either keep doing this or I have to do something that people like or whatever. And it was this process for me to work out. And you being a musician, how do you sit in your truth every single time and bring that out of yourself when you have this ego that you can never ever get rid of, that is always going to be thinking about outcome, that's always going to be thinking about destination? So many people say, oh, well, you know, like eradicate the ego or dissolve the ego, and it's like, you know what, to me, like, that's just a crock of shit. Like, your ego is always going to be there, and you have to deal with it. You have to deal with the fact that there's this petty little tyrant on the inside that's just like, woo, 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 what's this going to do for me this time? You know what I mean? And so what I want to do in this is have a conversation with real creative people who it's like, how do we deal with our egos? Because we talk so much about truth, and truth isn't the easiest thing for a lot of people. Like, yeah, we can find these mediums, but finding our voice and finding our truth outside of who we think we should be, who we want to be, who our parents want us to be, who our ego wants us to be, all of this stuff, like, it's a process, and it's not easy. Like, I have to sit down every single time I write to be like, what is this really about for me?
I just tell David to punch me in the face. That usually helps.
And I always oblige.
You, David?
For whatever you'd like, Kelly.
Dude, the tyrant running around in my head has no pants on half the time. I'm like, excuse me.
And now you have a little tyrant of you running around in David's head. Well played.
So no, but I want to know, like, how do you deal with your ego? Because you're a creative type, you are a musician, and like, how do you deal with your ego in your creative process?
Great question.
It's constant personal development. It's constant checking myself. It's you know, it's like I do the work and then I show up at my instrument. I show up at the blank page, and hopefully whatever progress I've made is allowing me to be a more clear channel for whatever wants to move through me. And you know, you said, how do you every time you play or whatever bring truth? And the truth is, I don't every time. I mean, I do my best, and I very much honor the process. I am humbled by the process constantly. Yes. I'm constantly reminded of how fleeting it is. Just the other day, I was hanging out with a friend of mine, and you know, playing music, and she like, you know, I like making up songs on the spot, and so she put me up to the challenge, and this beautiful song just came out. It just popped out, almost fully formed, just this gift from the clouds. And you know, it was beyond my comprehension where it came from. I listened back to it, and I'm like, how did I even do that? Where did that even come from? And then we were hanging out again the other day, and she's like, well, do it again. And I'm like, I can't do it again. Like, that just happened. Like, that's not how that works. You know, like as soon as that expectation is there, it totally raises the stakes, and like the ego just like feeds on that. And so, you know, and then of course the truth is also just by consistently showing up for my spiritual practice every day. I write morning pages every day. I meditate every day. I read inspirational stuff. I talk to Rahul every day. That's part of my spiritual practice.
That's right.
But seriously, no, it is having, you know, what I call like the Jedi Council, like having a sacred inner circle of believing mirrors of people that when I am not in touch with that part of myself, that truth, they will remind me, they will cosmically bitch slap me if I need to be, and be like, and again, another real life example, I was hanging with a friend yesterday who's a phenomenally talented musician, and he was like, yeah, I want to share this song with you. I kind of like thought I should maybe throw it in the trash. And I'm like, okay, like, let's hear it. And I'm telling you, like, I'm looking at this guy going, are you fucking crazy? Like, I don't blow smoke, but this song was phenomenal. And he was thinking that it belonged in the trash. So this is also part of our work. It's part of our path to loving ourselves. And, you know, I know self-love gets a bad rap. It's a woo-woo thing, and a lot of people are like, oh, I'm going to throw up a little bit. But that's really what this is all about. the more we see ourselves fully, the more we can fully receive ourselves, the more we can fully love ourselves, the more we can get out of the way and allow that little artist, that little child, that little voice to be heard, and to not judge it the way our parents were judging us, and to not limit it or tell it that it can't say what it wants to say. And we can just support it and create an environment internally and in our actual lives where those ideas, those songs, those creations can flourish, can be set free, and whoever receives them is going to receive them, and it's not even about that. Because today I got out of the way, I sang my song, I spoke my truth, and it fucking felt good. And that's all that matters.
That's awesome.
Wow.
Go
ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, something I feel like needs to be added to that. It's like, or to this idea that I feel is necessary for everyone here, because when I first came across this, it was just like, it was profound to me. Like, I came to this on my own, right? It came to me from this space, So it was like the ego running our lives. We can't get what we really want if it does that. But if we do this work and connect with ourselves, then all of us can get what it wants, including the ego. So it's like a child, it's kind of like having a conversation with your own ego, being like, look, and I've had many such conversations with my own ego, and I'm always having this conversation, and now it's like pretty much an automatic thing. It's like, yo, listen, Rahul, little Rahul, like Rahul. I call myself Rahul, right? I speak to myself in the third person. It's like, listen, Rahul. Little R. Listen, Rahul, listen. I love you, and if you roll with me, you're going to get not only what you want or what you think you want, but even more than that. And like once your ego sees that enough times, it chills the fuck out. It's like, oh man, I'm always playing with its toys because it always knows it's getting better toys. You don't have to do shit. So that conversation is extremely important. And so now, like when I sit down and write, that doesn't intervene because it's like, oh, I just, like I know I'm getting what I want, so I don't have to trip. Like that's that's critical. Having that conversation with that part of yourself is critical. It's critical.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it's also worth just, that's a beautiful contribution, Ra. And I think, the part of the ego that Kelly was speaking to is what I would more accurately refer to as like our inner critic. And, the ego is just a part of us that wants, a certain physical experience, that wants to see our accomplishments acknowledged. And yeah, I mean, some of that's healthy, and we're not, demonizing the ego and whatever. If we're judging the ego and we're pushing up against it, that's not going to get us anywhere. So I totally agree with the spirit of what you just shared, which is integrating that and bringing it back to love. And as we do that, that sort of more exaggerated dark side of the ego, the one that belittles us and that tells us not to even bother, sort of starts to just kind of dissipate and fade into the background. But I think acknowledging the existence of that voice is a very important starting point for some. For some of us, that may be the point that we're at. Is just even acknowledging, having the awareness that there is this bully in our consciousness, in our mind, that like talks us out of doing the very things that we really want to do.
Mm. That's awesome. David, did you have the last thing? I thought you were speaking up there.
Oh, just something that Chris said earlier about having that, Jedi council, and then kind of how you mentioned that I punch you in the face. I find that to be extreme, and me as a very spiritual, when it comes to not just being a spiritual being, but also like my everyday, my personality, like I need social connection. So that Jedi council that you were talking about, especially when it comes to spiritual activism, and even in the creative process, where we think like your buddy thought that this was garbage, he was going to throw it away. You need that counsel to say like, no, this is fantastic. That's you. Mike was actually that person for me, and continues to be, quite often. And I'm that person for him. And now that I know these wonderful, beautiful people, I speak with them on a pretty consistent basis. Especially Ra. We're sorry to use you all the time, buddy. But you're pretty awesome. But Mike was actually the one that got me to share that part of myself, especially as it comes to music. He told me, he was like, I know, I can hear your voice. And Mike had never heard me sing before. Very few people had. You know, I only sang one other time, and I wasn't even listening. I was just, as far as I was concerned, I was just talking about my feelings. I didn't realize that my voice, according to Mike and some other people that have heard it, said it was good. And we were sitting by the pool in his backyard, and he played Hallelujah, and I didn't realize he had a ulterior motive. It was to tell me, like, that's your voice. I can hear it. You need to sing that. And he made me sing it. And even as I sang it, when it got to the parts where, like, my heart was like, man, that would be awesome if you could do that. Like, hit that note. That would be fantastic. And as I got there, I just pulled away. I ran away from it. And I was like, I can't do that. And Mike started getting really pissed. And he was like, you can do that, I'm telling you, and we're not going to sleep, you know. I crashed on his couch that night. He's like, we're not going to sleep until you at least try it. And I played with it. Sure, I screwed it up a bunch of times, but that was because a part of me was still holding back. And when I finally let it belt, you know, it did sound good, you know. And I surprised myself, and then Mike does the same thing to me all the time. He'll start playing like a blues riff, and then I know when he does it because he just starts to freestyle, and then he stops and he looks at me and expects me to do the same thing. And it made me blast through another wall, you know, that I was very, very uncomfortable with, you know. And when we did it, we came out with like this masterpiece that was handed to us, both of us going back. I mean, we wrote a blues, I mean, the riff, everything, the hook, the chorus, the lyrics, all of it, and it just came out. And it was because of that, you know, bouncing that off of my, you know, spiritual brother, the soldier standing next to me, that reminded me, you know, I'm right here. Yeah, maybe we will fail, but we're going to fail together, you know. And if we do succeed, it's going to be because you had it in you the whole time, and I'll still be right there with you.
Whew.
So thank you, Michael.
I'm moved. Wow. I love you guys. We could go on all day, and I really would like to. However, we should wrap it up here. So I'm going to kind of pass the ball around and just ask everybody real quickly to let us know where we can find you. So, Rahul, if you could tell us a little bit about where our listener can find you.
Yes, RahulBhambhani.com and TheInvincibleMan.com. Shall
we spell that for our listener, Rahul?
Rahul Bhambhani. RahulBhambhani.
.com. Kelly, where can we find you, love?
At kellymarceau.com. Do you want me to spell that too?
I would like you to spell that.
KELLYMARCEAU.com.
David Pagan, where can we find you, brother?
You can find me at kickassdad.org, email at kickassdad1@gmail, or just look up. I'll be there.
Amen. I am Michael Mataluni from Kick-Ass Dad and the Spiritual Activist. Please look us up, hit us up. We'd love to hear from our listeners. And Andrea DiLorenzo has dropped off the line somehow, but you can find her at Andrea, ANDREA-DiLorenzo, DILORENZO.com. Our special guest today, Chris Assaad. Please, my brother, share with us how we can find you.
ChrisAssaad.com, ChrisAssaad right there, D.com.
Oh,
thank you guys so much for having me. This was double A. Yeah, man, this was very enjoyable. Thank you guys for just bringing such a high level of conversation forward and allowing me to be a part of it. Great.
No, it was our pleasure, Chris, truly. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us, and we will catch you on the flip.